The Long Road to True Happiness by WierdRandomTina. Chapter 25. True Feelings. It had been over 2 months since Poppy and Branch started spending time together. His journal documenting their visits was nearly full. He would have to start a new one within a day or two. The desk where he kept the princess's gifts was literally overflowing. The downfalls and bumps in the road had barely made a dent in the positives of their long-awaited friendship. Branch never imagined that he could ever feel any positive emotions ever again. Sure, he was still far from being all sunshine and rainbows, but at least he wasn't living in a permanent thunderstorm anymore. He was actually able to smile, laugh, relax, and somewhat enjoy himself. Most nights he could actually get some sleep. Bad dreams and nightmares still occurred, but were gradually becoming less and less frequent. And he had one beautiful, warm-hearted, optimistic pink troll to thank for all of that. Branch hadn't seen more than a glimpse of the beautiful pink princess in over 3 days. He caught a couple of friendly waves when they happened to spot each other at a distance in the village on day 1 and 2. Then day 3 he found a small box of mini almond cookies waiting by his bunker hatch for an evening snack. But tomorrow she was finally available to stop by for an actual visit. He had spent much of yesterday, the day before, and today deeply pondering over the one thing he had been nagging at him for a couple of weeks now. He wanted to find some way to confess his true feelings to Princess Poppy. Of course it broke his heart knowing that his love will never be reciprocated, but he still wanted her to know exactly how much he cared about her. If he was finally completely open with her, maybe it would take some of this increasing weight off of his shoulders. But Branch was more nervous than he'd ever been about anything. He didn't think it was even possible to be this nervous. How, in the name of Troll, could he find the right words to express the depth of his emotions? Where would he even start? He still wasn't great at talking freely about non-negative feelings. So telling the princess he loved her with all his heart was a universe away from any comfort zone. But Branch did seem to have a way with words, provided they were written on paper, not coming out of his mouth. So he retrieved his grey with green stitches journal, full of dozens of poems he had composed in the past. There were very recent ones that were written 2 or 3 years ago, and everywhere and in between. Some were cute and sweet, others were quite romantic. Some were a few lines, some were a few paragraphs, some were page-long rambles. But all the poems had 2 things in common. They were about Poppy, and they were created without any intention of ever allowing her to see them. Yet here Branch was, skimming over them as he considered choosing which one to give to her. But after almost 2 hours of searching through the entire book, twice, he slammed it shut in frustration. Somehow none were good enough. Too vague, too cheesy, too cringy, too dupe, too long or too brief, too romantic or not romantic enough, too thrown together, too not what he was aiming for. He needed something that was perfect, and that was extremely daunting. Branch felt a spark of doubt. Maybe this isn't such a good idea. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I ruin our friendship? His breath caught in his throat, the concept so dreadful that he swore his chest was being crushed by a Bergen's claw. After all these years of longing and hoping and wishing and dreaming, Branch was finally close to Princess Poppy in a way that he had never believed possible. Without her warm kindness, her uplifting positivity, her adorable laugh, her incredible smile, his life would mean nothing. Literally. She was everything to him. How could he risk losing everything? After all that's happened between them, Branch was certain he'd never had to worry about Poppy abandoning him as a friend. But that didn't mean that things couldn't become irreversibly awkward between them if he said something weird or embarrassing. But she deserves to know the truth. This isn't about me. It's about her. I want her to realize how much she means to me, and how wonderful she is. I need to be honest with her. I have to try. Making up his mind, Branch retrieved the little red notepad and the little orange pencil from the campout. To gain some inspiration, he stared over at the trinket she's given him, then let his gaze drift over to the open cupboard, where all her invites were stored, then reached into his nightstand to pull out his favourite photo of her. With a rush of determination, his hand with the pencil started moving almost subconsciously, his heart doing the talking. It ended up being an ideal length, more than a quick blurb, but less than a rambling story. It was to the point, summarised his thoughts and feelings well, and wasn't dismissive or overwhelming. It contained some new phrases that were off the top of his hair, mixed with bits and ideas from previous works. It started out as scribbled ideas, then a couple of rough drafts, and finally, a completely neatly written poem. The following day, a Monday late afternoon, finally arrived. Branch was waiting patiently outside his bunker. He was still feeling confident. He was satisfied with his confession poem, which was folded neatly into a light blue flowered envelope and tucked away into his hair. He had planned exactly what to say and how to say it, when he presented it to the girl of his dreams. That is, until said girl greeted him with a sneak hug attack. "Hug time!" came the excited squeal as slender pink arms suddenly squeezed around Branch's torso from behind. A noise akin to a squeak escaped his mouth. Bobby giggled like a maniac as she let go of him. "Sorry, but I couldn't resist. My hug watch went off on my way over here, and for once you didn't hear me coming. So I... that was so funny." And there was her sweet voice, and more cute giggles that quickly turned into even cuter chortles, and her dimpled smile, and her shining eyes, and her fluffy hair, and just like that, all courage in him became extinct. "That's your... I'm... Oh, perfect. Goodbye coherent sentences." After some more adorable giggling and a teasing look on her beautiful face, none of which was helping him with his lame stammering, Poppy took a deep breath, calmed down, and said, "Listen, this is probably going to sound really strange coming from me, but can we just sit out here and relax? Just hang out, but not really do anything?" Afraid to trigger another bout of blabbering, Branch opted to reply with a silent nod. He followed Poppy's lead as she settled herself against the nearby boulder. "It's just I can only stay half an hour. I have to meet up with some senior trollings at 4 for another scrapbooking tutorial." Once they were both comfortably seated in the soft grass, she continued, "I know that doesn't really give us much time to do anything specific, but I just really wanted to see you. I've missed you." Branch could feel his face rapidly heating up. "Oh, please don't say it in that voice with that face," he silently begged her. For the next 15 minutes, it was Poppy who kept initiating conversations. Biggie lost Mr. Dinkles, and it was Cooper who found him in the strangest place. The annual village-wide pillow fight took place, and was the craziest one yet. Maddie's working on a cool, new, super-secret flavour of pie. Poppy made a new friend named Legsy, and Smidge has a major crush on the gentle veterinarian Milton Moss. Branch was trying his hardest to listen, but he kept getting distracted by his own nervousness. Every time there was a break in the stories, he procrastinated. I'll hold off until the next pause. It'll be too random if I say it now. I may be interrupting her. I'll wait. Well, I can't say it now. What am I supposed to say? Hey, speaking of major crush, I have one on you. Time was ticking away. This was the perfect opportunity. All alone, doing nothing. Calm, sunny, quiet day. As perfect as things could possibly get. But it was one thing to practice a speech in front of his own reflection, or to recite it to an inanimate, unresponsive photo of her. When the stunningly beautiful love of his life is sitting right there beside him, looking at him with fuchsia eyes that shine brighter than the sun, and speaking to him in a voice sweeter than honey, that's a whole different scenario. Why do I have to overthink everything? Any other troll would just stroll up to their love interest at any time, in any place, and pull their heart out with no hesitation. Why can't I be like that? Just this one time. Hell, I'm not even trying to be verbal about it. I am literally just handing her an enclosed letter. Poppy easily picked up on Branch's distractedness. She could literally sense his anxiety in the air around them, like a dense fog. Come on, Branch. Just tell me what's going on in that mind of yours. She's witnessed similar behaviour from him before, wanting to say something and unsure of how to go about it. But if she questioned him directly, he would deny it and or become even more flustered. So instead, Poppy decided to try to ease some of his nerves with casual banter. You know, Branch, you really are a wonderful friend. You're understanding and honest and caring. And the snack pack thinks so too. They actually mentioned the other day about you hanging out with us again sometime. Seeing that her companion wasn't as tense, she continued on about a funny story to do with Cooper, then a riddle, then mentioning the breakfast buffet taking place tomorrow, and asking if he'd be interested in making an appearance. With a small smile, Branch agreed to it. His contented expression prompted Poppy to ask a question that's been on her mind for a while. Branch, I'm not really sure how to ask this, but are you happy now, or... Branch put some thought into it, before answering honestly. I'm not sure. I feel better than I have in decades, but there is still a darkness inside, a shadow that pulls me down. You've really made a difference, though. Poppy wanted to be all smiles at his comment, but he barely gave her a chance to be. His expression suddenly dropped, and now he almost looked ashamed. But I'll never be like the other trolls. I hope you realise that. I know that's what you've been aiming for, and I really am trying, but there's only so much I can change. I am the way I am, and at my core, I'm still just me. And I'm sorry I can't be what you want me to be. What I want you to be? Poppy had always known Branch lacked confidence, but never imagined his self-esteem was this low. He still didn't see himself the way she did, so Poppy took a hold of his hands, before saying as earnestly as she knew how, Branch, look at me. I don't want you to be like the other trolls. I like you because you are the way you are. His expression shifted to a curious disbelief. So she explained, I'll admit, at the very beginning, that may have been my goal, to get you to act like everyone else. Because I thought that's what would be best for you. Because crazy parties and constant hugs and joyful singing was all I'd ever known. So I couldn't imagine anyone wanting to be any other way. I thought all that would make you happy, because that's what works for everyone else. But then my perspective changed. You changed it. You told me there are different ways to have fun. Life doesn't have to be a giant crazy party all the time to be meaningful. Little moments aren't boring, but often turn out to be the most special. And happiness isn't always something that comes easy. I see that now. Thanks to you. Branch was speechless yet again. Just when he thought his heart couldn't melt anymore, she went and turned it into pure liquid. Here Poppy was, the one literally changing his entire life, and she's praising him for what little he's done for her. How could she be so exceptional? How could she care about him this much? How could he not fall in love with her? After a second, Poppy's expression dropped a bit now, as she continued in a regretful tone. I'm sorry I made you think that you aren't good enough, Branch. Here I tried to help you, and all I was doing was helping you feel worse about yourself. No! No, Poppy, you didn't do that. At that, Branch promptly found his voice. It wasn't you. It was me. You know how I overthink everything and get anxious over nothing. I know you are only trying to help. And you have. More than I ever imagined possible. And about everything you just said. You have no idea how much that means to me. Poppy smiled sweetly at his words, so he found himself adding, I just always found it difficult to believe you could genuinely enjoy being around me. You said found? Branch raised an eyebrow at her odd reply. Huh? Poppy repeated with more detail. You said you found it difficult to believe. As in past tense. So, does that mean you finally believe that I truly enjoy your company? That I like you for being you? Branch considered his own wording for a second. I guess I do. Yeah. Poppy smiled such a sweet, warm, cute, beautiful smile. Good. And don't you ever forget it. To emphasize the point, she scooted closer and snuggled into him. With her soft, fluffy bangs tickling his jaw, her ears squished against the side of his face, and her tall ponytail gently brushing into his own hair. Branch closed his eyes and leaned into the beautiful pink troll, no longer uneasy about being so close to her. He almost couldn't believe he ever was. Now he only felt warmth, radiating from hair to toe. After 5 or 10 minutes, no exact telling of how many, Poppy gave Branch a long goodbye hug, then, very reluctantly, stood up to leave. Whether it was a sudden burst of courage, or he simply wasn't thinking clearly, Branch stood up too and spoke. Wait, She turned around, and somehow he managed to mostly keep eye contact, as he continued. Princess Poppy, I have something to tell you. Well, it's more like something to give you. Actually, I guess it's kind of both. She took a couple of steps towards him. Then I'm all ears, Branch. Tell me anything. I know you are, and I appreciate that, but I'm not sure it's something I can put into words. So... He reached into his hair to reveal the blue envelope. Here. Read it when you get home. Preferably when you're by yourself. For the first time ever, Branch was glad Poppy had to leave. It would be unbearably cringy to sit there and watch her read it. Poppy gently took the envelope from Branch's hand. She was burning with curiosity, but wanted to respect his request. It took every ounce of her willpower not to tear it open right then and there. Yet, when the day was over, and she was secure in the solitude of her pod, Poppy found herself hesitating to open it. All day she'd been on thorns and pine needles, jittery like a trolling on a sugar rush, who had been told to stand still, eager to get home and read the letter or story or riddle or whatever it may be, praying for the time to go by faster. But now, that anticipated time had finally come, and all the pink troll could do was stare at the envelope, which was sitting over on her nightstand against her clock. After several minutes of staring at it, she walked over to it to stare at it up close, then finally picked it up, only to keep staring at it in her hands, which were apparently trembling, for another several minutes, admiring the cute little periwinkle flowers decorating it, how neatly it was sealed, how it was almost perfectly square. Why am I stalling? Just open it already. It's not going to bite. Poppy's heart was pounding in her throat. She had gotten as far as holding on to the paper flap, but that was all. She always felt a rush of excitement in the midst of an awaiting surprise, but this was a different feeling altogether. He's never given me anything like this. All his little gifts have always been so straightforward. I haven't the slightest idea of what to expect. Inevitably, Poppy's curiosity overpowered her. She lifted up the flap, removed the pale beige paper inside, and gently unfolded it. Her best guess was that this was some kind of thank you note. Or maybe an invitation to visit him? She'd always made cards for him, so maybe he decided to make one for her in return. Or something simpler, like a funny joke or a riddle made up for not seeing one at the campout. Therefore, the Pink Princess was totally unprepared for what was written on the paper.
Dear Princess Poppy, I is for the isolated troll, lost in the cold shadows, until you shone your beautiful light into his world. L is for the laughter you've always sent his way. O is for the optimism you give him every day. V is for the value of being his one true friend. E is for eternity. His love for you has no end. Y is for the yesterday that never lives up to each wonderful today, for you are his tomorrow. O is for his outlook on life, forever changed by your delightful spirit and radiant smile. U is for undefinable, for there are too few words to express how extraordinary you are. From Branch.
Poppy stood there, staring at the paper, the words written on the paper. Beautiful words that formed a poem, a romantic poem, written by Branch, specifically for her. Branch wrote a beautifully worded romantic poem specifically for her. To say she was stunned was a severe understatement. She reread it again, then once more, slower and more intently each time. She wasn't reading this correctly. Was she? She was feeling quite lightheaded, so maybe she was imagining all of these compassionate phrases. Maybe this was a dream, and she just couldn't recall going to sleep. Poppy was certainly imagining what the first bold letter of each word combined to spell out. Eventually, the princess flopped down onto her bed, her jello legs unable to hold her up any longer. She stared up at her dark magenta ceiling, her brain swarming with memories while her heart drowned in emotions. Very gradually, her thoughts and feelings settled and grew more intelligible. More and more over the last while, Poppy had wondered if maybe Branch kind of likes her. his soft looks, all his cute blushing and bashfulness, his random little gifts and gestures, keeping all of her random little gifts, the surprise picnic and the homemade pie, the beautiful smile comment, all the hugs and snuggling, his spellbound reaction to her kissing his cheek. But she always ended up brushing each thing off and convincing herself it was nothing. Branch is still just adjusting to attention. He's a generally shy, kind-hearted troll. He's grateful to finally have a friend, etc. Poppy told herself a dozen times to stop being silly. There's no way withdrawn and serious and independent Branch would have romantic feelings for someone. Especially her of all trolls, since up until very recently, all she ever did was get on his nerves. But once we got to know each other better, and once I learned to be patient and listen to him, Branch grew to put up with me, then like me, and then, eventually, Poppy was flattered that he ever felt so strongly about her. More delighted than she'd ever been, and that was saying something. Over the years, she'd received plenty of sweet little love letters from various trolls, including several really nice ones from Creek, but none of them from him or any other troll were as passionate and meaningful and heartwarming as Branch's. It made her realise, his camp out poem must have been about me all along. With her heart soaring, Poppy languidly daydreamed about the sweet grey troll for a while. Eventually, she looked over the poem again. For the 10th or 11th time, she wasn't keeping track. She admired the handwriting. Plain, but very neat, yet also a bit rough. It suits him. While studying Branch's unique text, the pink troll felt a familiar pang in her chest. Like déjà vu. Some of the words looked very, very familiar. Where have I read them before? I haven't seen much of his written work, but I don't remember reading these anywhere. The princess pondered for a moment over the brief notes he's left on his hatch door when she stopped by and he was out for the day, the messy side notes he added to his books, the bold labels on the sides of his storage crates. Nope, nowhere. So her thoughts began to wander outside of the box, trying to come up with any possible lead, and that's when it hit her, like a hair slap to the face. Poppy sprang up from her bed so quickly her feet didn't catch her. After getting up off the carpet, she raced over to her closet, retrieving from it a thick pink and orange scrapbook, labelled "Small Gifts Are Just As Special." She flipped the past pages of tiny sticky notes from random trolls that said a quick message like, "Have a good day, thanks," or even just a "Hi." A few of those insignificant but cute little love notes she had received in the past. Dozens of basic pictures that trollings had scribbled on crayon, or messily painted of her. Until, finally, she found what she was looking for. A short, unsigned, but very lovely poem that she had received over 1.5 years ago, after a difficult week when she was struggling with her new royal responsibilities. It read, "When dark clouds conceal the sky, when heavy rains pour down, when cold winds tear through the forest, always remember that you are the sun, a beautiful and radiant light that will always reappear, even after the worst of storms." The mysterious note had appeared on the table under her outer window, and its thoughtful words had been the only thing able to lift her spirits that week. For months she had asked around, and snuck peeks at people's writing whenever she could, but had never found out who it was from. It drove Poppy crazy that she couldn't thank the kind-hearted secret admirer who had made it for her. Anonymous gifts weren't unheard of, but normally the giver would come forward eventually. And even if they didn't, it shouldn't take that much effort to figure out who it was. Eventually, she thought about the nagging mystery increasingly less, put it at the back of her mind. But she never forgot about it. The gentle fire burning in Poppy's chest grew hotter, until she had to sit down on the floor. Back then, and up until very recently, Branch had always acted so gruff toward her, often to the point where it seemed like he couldn't stand to be near her. Yet, he wrote a compassionate poem for her when she was feeling down. He not only noticed that she was having a rough week, but went out of his way to try and cheer her up, even when he was never happy himself. Did that mean... Did he secretly love me back then too? Has he had feelings for me all this time? Poppy knew he genuinely got annoyed by her impulsive positivity a lot. But maybe he still liked me despite all that. Branch may not have loved her back then, but he certainly did care about her much more than he let on. It would explain his behaviour when they first started hanging out. How he was shyly awkward rather than irritated by their bits of closeness. Ears brushing, hands touching, extended eye contact. He did want to be close to her, but he'd never been close to anyone, let alone a girl he had hidden a crush on. So he struggled with how to act. Over time, he adjusted to her company, gained some happiness, and discovered that Poppy accepted him for who he is. Branch grew more comfortable letting a hint of his true feelings seep through. And perhaps those feelings grew as he spent more time with me. Instantly, all the puzzle pieces fit together as a tidal wave of memories and emotions rushed through her. Poppy's own strange feelings suddenly made more sense now too, longing to hug him and be closer to him more than anyone else, being tongue-tied around him, daydreaming about him, admiring his handsome features, missing his presence 2 seconds after leaving him, wanting to kiss his cheek again in the morning after the cyan stars, feeling uneasy, perhaps jealous was the word, when the twins pointed out his good looks, feeling disappointed when she repeatedly brushed off the possibility of Branch liking her. She subconsciously wanted him to like her, because she unknowingly liked him. But Poppy had never allowed herself to admit that she was gradually falling for him. Her heart had known all along, but her brain had been deaf to the screaming clues. Despite her minor suspicions, she had concluded there was no way in hell Branch would ever feel that way about her. So why bother? Why go and cause discomfort between them when they're finally becoming really good friends? It was just a silly crush, a minor infatuation. It would go away over time. But the way Poppy felt about Branch was something she had never experienced before. Yet, it was slightly familiar. Similar to how she used to like Creek, but so much stronger. Like the light of a firefly compared to the sun. It was every positive emotion combined. Warmer than a summer day, higher than the clouds, brighter than a shooting star, fuzzier than a hedgebug, softer than dandelion fluff. I wonder if this is how Branch feels about me. A deep blush instantly invaded her freckled cheeks. Only when the blush finally subsided did Poppy notice that it had gotten significantly darker outside. But there was no point even in attempting to shut her eyes. Open or closed, all she could see was Branch. Thousands of images whirling through her mind faster than she could comprehend. There was so much she wanted to say to him, needed to say to him, as well as a strong longing to be by his side right now. How could she possibly wait until tomorrow to talk to him? Would she even have a chance to do so with the breakfast buffet taking place? She couldn't discuss this subject with him with other trolls around. But how could she be near him and act nonchalant and say nothing? He'd think the letter, his feelings, meant nothing to her. He'd be so hurt and confused. But she couldn't avoid him either. That would have the same effect. She may not have a chance to properly talk to him until later tomorrow, or the next day. I can't wait. I'll lose my mind. And I can't make him wait and just leave him guessing. He'll assume the worst. Just thinking of hurting Branch's feelings, even in the slightest way, rips my heart apart. I need him to know exactly how I feel. Despite how late it was, Poppy finally made up her mind to pay a quick visit to the bunker. He usually stays up this late anyway. I think. I hope.
Meanwhile, Branch was totally freaking out. No. Losing his mind. Going ballistic. Whichever of the three is more severe. He's been doing so since about 5 minutes after Poppy left, which meant he's been doing so for about 5 hours. Did he really give the princess a detailed love letter, confessing his deepest feelings for her through romantic poetry? What a stupid idea. A ridiculous idea. A crazy idea. Why the buzzing hair did he do it? It was far too late to take it back. But what would happen next? What if she thinks it's weird? What if it was overbearing? What if things get awkward between us? What if she's so uncomfortable she hardly wants to be around me anymore? It'll be my own fault. What was I thinking?
Branch couldn't have sat still for 1 second, even if his very survival depended on it. He occupied his evening with fruitless pacing around the bunker, then random strenuous activities in his gym, then more pacing, then frantic scribbles in his painting room, followed by more and more pacing. He paced around until his feet grew sore, yet still he wasn't encouraged to quit. So, at last, he headed towards the elevator. It's well past sunset, but I need to get some fresh air, or I'm going to go insane. Maybe a long quiet walk outside will help me calm. Thump! 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 The unexpected noise of knocking on his door above caused Branch to literally fall backward. He was unable to stand back up, suddenly weighed down by dread. There was only one troll it could be. So many petrified thoughts were swarming in his pounding head. He couldn't even decipher any of them. She didn't knock again, or wait for a response. Instead, Branch heard the distinctive sound of the elevator descending. He managed to get to his feet, but was visibly shaking. There was nothing to do except wait anxiously for her arrival. The second she came into view, his gaze redirected down to the floor, unable to look her in the eyes. He probably looked like a trolling waiting to be scolded, by the way his hands nervously twisted together. Poppy's gaze, however, never faltered, unable to take her eyes off him. Once the elevator came to a halt on the floor, after what felt like an hour, their eyes finally met. Both trolls stood there, a decent hair stretch apart, silently facing each other. Anxiously, tentatively, Branch studied Poppy's expression. She looked happy. Of course, this was Poppy after all. But in a different way. Instead of bouncing on the spot, or holding back a squeal, or looking ready to explode, she was very mellow and resolute, almost shy. Was that good or bad? After what felt like another hour passed before his guest finally spoke again, not very exuberantly, but rather very softly. Hi again. I know it's really late for me to stop by, but I really need to talk to you.
Oh no. That did not sound good at all. I knew it. That poem was far too overt.
Poppy was even fidgeting a bit, in an anxious way rather than her usual giddy way.
What have I done?
Branch's heart was pounding painfully in his chest, making it nearly impossible to breathe. It's about the letter, the poem that you gave me earlier.
Oh no. Here it comes.
Poppy could barely even maintain eye contact now, as she spoke. She'd never had an issue with it before. Ever. She was literally the village champion of staring contests. That was... It was...
Oh no, she can't even figure out what to say.
Beautiful.
Oh?
There was no hint of discomfort, or a tease, or forced praise. None of that. Only sincerity. Her cheeks were a bit pinker than usual, as she shyly tried and failed to brush that little strand of hair away from her eye. Way more than beautiful. The most beautiful thing I've ever read. No one has ever said anything so thoughtful and heartfelt to me. Did you really mean all of it? Her warm eyes were so hopeful. Her soft voice was so hopeful. There was no point in beating about the bush anymore. What could he say? Something stupid like, I guess so, or sort of? No. There was only one way to go from here, and there was no turning back now. So, in answer to her question, Branch looked her in the eye and murmured,
Yes. Every word.
Poppy's wonderful smile made his heart flip. A heart that was already struggling to deal with all these newfound emotions. But the princess wasn't even finished yet. And so, what about in this poem? She pulled out an old plain letter. Even though he had pushed that one to the back of his mind, it only took a distant glimpse of him to recognize it. When I was stressed out last year, before the Royal Review. You wrote this one too, didn't you? I always loved this one. It made me feel so much better. But I never knew who it was from. It was from you. Branch shifted in embarrassment. He had always been confident she would never discover the secret author, especially if she hadn't after all this time. Anyone else would have forgotten something so trivial. Of course, she remembered it, and kept it, and effortlessly matched up the very distinctive handwriting.
Yes, it was me.
So, Poppy was now fidgeting more than him. Does this mean, when you said in that recent poem that you love me, you mean like actually love me? As in love with me? His head and gaze lowered. His voice was barely audible.
Yes.
He waited for her to ask another question, or make some form of comment, but was met with total silence. Finally, he dug up the last drop of courage remaining in him, and raised his head just enough to meet her eyes. Fuchsia eyes were brimming with the purest warmth and affection Branch had ever seen. Poppy then took a few little steps toward him. All this time? You were so distant when I tried to reach out to you. And then, these last few months, why didn't you ever say something?"
His hands dropped to his sides. The quiet acceptance in his dismissive words broke her heart. "You're the princess. I'm the outcast. I knew there was no point." She opened her mouth to object, but when Branch raised his head to look directly at her, she was startled, silent, by the deep sadness in his pale eyes. "I've done a poor job showing that I cared about you. You must have believed all these years that I despised you. I never intended for that. I tried to push you away because I was afraid to let myself get close to anyone. Afraid to lose someone again. And I knew you deserved better than me anyway." With every word Branch spoke, Poppy's heart tore a little more. He looked so small, so insecure. But he wasn't even finished yet. "I just wanted you to finally know the truth. The last thing I'd ever want is to jeopardize our friendship, but if knowing how I feel makes you uncomfortable, I understand." Poppy took a deep breath, partially to keep herself from bursting into tears, and partially to prepare herself for what she was about to say. She took a few more steps forward before speaking tenderly. "Branch, knowing that you care so much about me would never make me uncomfortable. Quite the opposite. In fact, nothing will ever ruin our friendship. Ever." His features softened and his entire body relaxed. He exhaled a light sigh of relief that ended with one of his handsome smiles. She admired his handsome smile for a few seconds. Then the princess continued shyly, "But maybe this could make it even stronger?" Branch's smile shifted into a confused frown, so Poppy explained. "What I mean is," she closed the remaining distance between them as she spoke, "I came down here to thank you for the wonderful poem, and for the previous one, but for another reason too." She gently took hold of his hands, ignoring the violent pounding of her heart. "I needed you to know that I feel the same about you." Poppy's heart warmed at how adorable he looked, with his mouth dropped open and his eyes widened at her revelation. But she was quickly thrown into bewilderment when Branch yanked his hands away from her. In an instant, his expression was very hurt and disappointed. "Don't do that." Poppy's warmth hardened into a cold ache. "Did I do something wrong?" "Don't do what?" "You're only saying that to avoid hurting my feelings. You asked me to be honest with you, and I finally was. So the least you can do is be honest with me."
He wouldn't even glance at her now. Poppy wanted to cry. "He doesn't believe me. Branch, I am being honest with you. I may sugarcoat things a lot, but I would never lie to you, especially about something like this, because I know it would only hurt you more." The sincerity in Poppy's voice was clear, certain, unwavering. He glanced at her again, still highly doubtful, so she continued. "Please believe me when I say this. I care about you more than I've cared about anyone."
Branch's conflicted emotions were swirling like a tornado. Of course he wanted to believe that. Of course he wanted Poppy to feel about him the way he feels about her. But there was no way in hell it was that easy. He wants her to love him, and now she does. The universe has never been on his side, so why would it start now? He knew she cared about him, of course, but she loved him the way she loved Biggie and Smidge and Mandy and half the village. Casual platonic love was not the kind of love he felt for her. Out of confusion and disbelief, Branch's words came out much rougher than he intended. "But how can you? You're cheerful and optimistic and beautiful, and I was downright horrible to you for years."
"But you changed." Poppy's voice remained soft. "Plus, all your anger and negativity was out of grief. No one can blame you for that. You were never given a real chance to be happy. And now I see the real you. And I love that person."
"But I'm still nothing like the rest of the trolls. I never will be."
"You're right. You are unlike the rest of the trolls. That's exactly what I like about you. You've been so kind to me these last few months. You make me so happy. A different kind of happy. A better kind of happy. Happier than I've ever been. And that's saying something. I think about you all the time, even when I'm nowhere near you. If something's bothering me, anything at all, just seeing your smile makes me forget what was wrong in the first place. I love being around you, even if we end up doing nothing all day. And it's not just you who's changed, Branch. You've changed me for the better too." She interrupted her own sentimental speech with a chuckle. "Sorry, I'm not as good as you at the poetic stuff."
Branch tried to swallow the lump in his throat, but it was no use. She had just described exactly how he feels about her. Did he dare to hope? His voice had lost its edge, but he still sounded completely lost. But I'm grey."
"So what? I'm pink. My dad's orange. Guy's silver and glittery. Harper's a bunch of colours. That vase over there is brown. So what?"
Poppy's words were so casual, spoken so naturally, like it was the simplest, most logical thing in the world. How many times would Poppy's words render him speechless, take his breath away? This had to be a dream. He had had plenty of ones similar to this, after all. There's no way his deepest, most impossible wish had just been granted in the blink of an eye. He, pessimistic grump Branch, loves beautiful Princess Poppy, and she loves him back? How? Why? She interrupted his thoughts by closing the small distance between them and tenderly wrapping her arms around his torso, snuggling into him as close as she could possibly get. Branch gave up trying to analyze the situation. Somehow, in some crazy way, for some insane reason, this perfect moment was happening to him. For real. As his heart began to expand in the strongest, most joyous way he'd ever felt, his arms returned the sweet embrace. Not tentatively and lightly like usual, but confidently, no longer concerned about holding back his deep affections for her. For several minutes the two trolls were engulfed in a hug that was more intimate than any of their previous ones. Poppy's arms were cramping from holding Branch so firmly. Her heart soared at how snugly he held her. Sure, she'd shared countless hugs over the years. Cuddly best friend ones, quick celebratory ones, long ones meant for comfort. But never anything quite like this. Their bodies were moulded together like two perfect puzzle pieces. Branch hardly registered that he had let out several contented sighs, and his one hand had moved up into the back of her head, while the other gently started to stroke her back. Neither were in a hurry to leave. Neither wanted to let go of the other. Neither wanted this to come to an end. But, after what seemed like hours, they gradually loosened up,
then withdrew from each other's loving grasp, to hold hands and gaze softly into each other's eyes. Poppy's were glowing with a strong love he'd never imagined would ever be directed at him alone. Branch's eyes were glowing too. They were almost fully light blue and glistening. Even his skin, though it was still pale, was more turquoise than grey. His dark hair gave off a beautiful blue-purple colour under the light of the mushrooms. As they stood face to face, unwavering, Poppy was surprised he was letting her be this close, and for this long. Their noses were practically touching. He looked very at ease, so she didn't move back. How could she even attempt to move away when she was mesmerized yet again by those amazingly soft eyes and sweet little smile? She was spellbound by how unusually close his handsome face was to hers. Poppy couldn't help but think about how if she were to lean that little extra bit. No, she quickly shut off that train of thought, embarrassed by herself. That would be way too big of a step. Branch only recently got acquainted with basic casual hugs, so he won't be ready for that level of affection yet. No need to stick the hairball into this perfect moment, but midway through her split-second conclusion, Branch's eyes drifted shut, and he closed the small gap between them, his lips softly touching hers. Even if Poppy hadn't been completely frozen in pleasant shock, she would have had no time to react before he pulled away. His contented expression had instantly vanished, hardening with fear and shame. What the flipping hell was he thinking? Did he really just kiss her? Branch's stammering was an awkward whisper. I'm sorry. How could he be so impulsive? Why did he have to ruin this 1 in a million perfect moment? I didn't mean to. His panic was cut short when Poppy brought her hands up to his purple cheeks and interrupted his ramblings with a quick little kiss of her own. Branch was so stunned he merely stared at her, his cheeks darkening for a whole different reason now. She let out a few shy chuckles, which increased when one corner of his open mouth involuntarily lifted into a shy grin. She figured Branch wouldn't be speaking any time soon, so she forced aside her own bashfulness and managed to murmur, "Well, I guess I should go. It's pretty late, and I have to get up extra early, so I'll see you tomorrow morning, right? At the breakfast buffet?" He gave an adorable nod, though she was pretty sure he didn't hear a word of what she said. So Poppy said a sweet goodnight before turning around to scamper toward the elevator. Before even coming close to it, she skidded to a halt so abruptly she nearly fell forward. She returned to Branch, giving him a final quick hug and tiny kiss on the cheek. He remained frozen on the spot, even long after her beautiful, vibrant pink form had left the bunker. The reality of the situation was finally catching up to him, and for the first time in decades, Branch wanted to leap for joy. She loves me. Poppy loves me. The way I love her. She loved my poem. I confessed my feelings for her, and she returned them. She loves me for who I am. She loves me as more than just a friend. She was here in my arms. We kissed twice. Albeit extremely briefly, but the details weren't important to him at the moment. It was all so surreal to Branch, like he had just watched a play from a front row seat, like it had really happened, but to someone other than him, like he had experienced another wonderful dream and just hadn't woken up yet, like his body was still underground, but his mind was up in the clouds. It felt so strange to want to laugh and cry at the same time, for his heart to be filling with love instead of pain. All those detailed daydreams and vivid dreams of the beautiful pink princess loving him were nothing compared to the real thing. All Poppy could think about on her way back to her pod was, I kissed Branch! Well, more accurately, he kissed me, and then I kissed him, and then I kissed him on the cheek again. Oh my hair, Branch and I actually kissed! She had always assumed Creek would be her first kiss. She didn't think about it on a regular basis or anything, but it had crossed her mind a few times. Imagining it would happen during a special romantic moment, such as on their first official date, daydreaming about whether or not it would be him or her that would initiate it. But Poppy was certainly not disappointed that things had not gone according to plan. That night she fell into a comfortable sleep, dreaming of cuddling with Branch, the one troll she truly loves, and the one troll who truly loves hers. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one because I freaking loved it. Oh my god, they finally kissed and the confession was gorgeous, and that the insecurity and the fact that they communicate so well, the poem freaking made me almost cry. Oh god, that was beautiful. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.